Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Admissions Live. Tonight we will be talking about yield and a little bit of retention. We're talking about post-accept issues, so I'm hoping that you're taking a break from reading applications or writing student letters of recommendation and tuning in to join us tonight. We have a great topic, and I'm really excited to get started. Before we do that, I'm going to give a little shout out to our sponsors. And Admissions Live is sponsored by Integral, the creators of the Schools app on Facebook. Learn how other schools are predicting and improving yield with their social enrollment analysis. That's right, yield. That's what we're talking about tonight. And we've got a link that's going to be going out to you to see just how Integral is working with these schools. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Scavenger. They are a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. Scavenger is all about your message to students and delivering it in a fun way. Just how fun is it? See for yourself. We're sending out a link with a video from the University of Louisville. Watch how Louisville instituted a Cardinal Challenge, and it served as a way for students to unite with their campus using a popular cell phone game. So I've got that link coming out to you right now. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Welcome to College. They believe that it's all in the college visit. They've created a web and mobile app that helps students. This web and mobile app helps students measure and manage their most critical recruitment tools, which is the college visit. They have over 15,000 ratings on their site, Welcome to College, so you can check out how your institution is stacking up. Got a link to the Welcome to College site going out to you so you can find out how to become a school partner. Last but certainly not least, Admissions Live is sponsored by Zinch.com, the leader in social admissions. The Zinch China team helps colleges and universities with market intelligence and brand monitoring initiatives while making the most of their international recruitment budgets. Recently, Zinch China has been cited in Forbes, the Chronicle of Higher Ed, and the New York Times on important topics such as fraudulent documents and English language competency of Chinese applicants to U.S. schools. For more information, be sure to email outreach@zinch.com or tweet @socialadmission. I've got a link going out about that more recent article where Zinch China was cited in Forbes about a cheating scandal coming out of China. So check out those links. Be sure to check out our sponsors. And I'm excited to talk with our guest tonight. We have Chris Dorto coming. And it's actually my recruitment territory, so very familiar with the area, beautiful area down there in Long Island. So I'm excited to have Chris on the show. We've got so much to talk about. I want to bring Chris onto the show, and hopefully he can get me settled in and ready to talk about yield. Chris, how are we doing over in Stony Brook?
I'm fantastic.
Excellent.
How's everything up there in the Great White North?
Well, it seems like I've had a little bit of a little too much Red Bull, a little too much coffee, and I've got myself wired on these headlines.
Where's Seth? I thought he was like your grad assistant. I thought he did all this behind the scenes stuff for you, no?
Yeah, he doesn't, no.
No,
it's a one-woman show.
You should get him to do that.
Yeah, okay, I'll look into that. Also need hair and makeup. That's also on the list. Right.
Got a little shine up here.
Yeah, so Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Admissions Live is still new. We'll get there.
Yeah, live show, piece of cake. So I really want to thank you for coming on. Excited. This is such a big topic to tackle, so I'm happy that you agreed to tackle such an important agenda item for all admissions offices. And curious, I'm sure the audience is curious too, why you're interested in talking about yield and what your background is and how you became so interested in it.
Well, for me, like as you said, I mean, I came from sort of a student affairs background, and so yield was one of the things for me that was sort of a new concept in higher ed, because it was something that I didn't see as an issue as a new counselor. It was something that you'd sit and you talk to a student who's sitting at your desk or in your lobby or across the table, and you kind of say to that student, you're a perfect fit for my school. Why are you applying anywhere else? And it's a no-brainer to me that, the students that we admit, well, they should just enroll here because Stony Brook is really the perfect place for them. And it's the most important piece of the admissions process, I think. And it's the one thing that we have seemingly very little control over. The students have all these applications and there's so much going through their heads this time of year. And it's our attempt to sort of take back that, not control necessarily, because ultimately the decision rests on the students, but, to sort of put some control back in our hands in the process. Our associate provost here always tells us the class is ours until they enroll first day of classes. And we really need to kind of take ownership of that. As a student affairs person, I think I always saw our job as admissions folks to be the ones who are making connections for students between the incoming class and folks on campus, whether that be advising staff or student affairs staff or whoever, faculty, and we're sort of that conduit to make that happen. And again, for me, it's a no-brainer that you're going to want to get in touch with the student activities folks, and you're going to want to learn about res life, and you're going to want to do all that stuff as an admitted high school senior. And so that's why I'm passionate about it.
Absolutely. And it's such a great perspective, because I want to know how many undergraduate and graduate admissions offices get involved across campus like that, and make the effort to really get those students in touch with other departments. Or is it that the admissions offices are just working in their own silo and trying to guess what the students want or guess what these other departments might want? And
I think it's difficult. I mean, especially at a big place like Stony Brook, to get that kind of buy-in from other departments, because everybody, I mean, you talk about the silo thing, it's certainly prevalent in higher ed, and you want to find that balance between us helping them and them helping us, and what's really in it for them. I mean, to me, it's obvious what's in it for them. It's more students, and they need more students to be involved in closing activities and to take classes once in a while and all those kinds of things. So.
Right. And I think some of that challenge is a lot of times is who owns that responsibility, right? So is it the admissions office's sole responsibility to bring in those students and affect yield, or is it a campus-wide commitment and responsibility? And I think we know what we would say.
Good thing no one on campus is watching this. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's certainly a campus responsibility. Whether it's other departments see it as that, I suppose depends on the campus. I mean, we're lucky here that we have a number of liaisons across campus, and I have other places where I've worked where they've been very responsive to us when we reach out for different kinds of programs. And there are always going to be departments, and there are always going to be people that you're not going to be able to reach in this time of year. And you sort of try to find a way to work around that as much as you can. There's always that one department that balks at showing up for admitted student open house or whatever, and you have to sort of piece that together without stepping on too many toes along the way.
Sure. And not having it certainly affect the student's impression, because those first impressions, especially on campus, or even second or third impressions when you're on that campus, it's a critical time to meet with your students, and those are some of the things that I think we'll get into. I wanted to kind of backtrack and talk about again why we're talking about yield and why we're talking about it right now. I think it's a crazy time for college admissions offices. And again, I have to thank you for taking time away from this busy application season. We're not just working, 9 to 5 these days. It's a really tough time of year. So the reason why I think it's important to talk about yield now and to, give everyone a break, I hope, from listening to or reading those applications and come and listen to us, is that this is the time where we're starting to send out letters, right? And this is the time that yield conversion starts.
Yeah, I mean, I did 2 information sessions today on campus, and I would say among the I'd say we probably had about 75 or 80 students between the two sessions, and more than half of them were admitted seniors. And that's our bread and butter. You want to make sure that they're getting what they need out of their campus experience. And it's something that we've sort of battled here with, how we do even like something as simple as an information session on a random, whatever day of the week this is, Tuesday. And see, we're crazy. This is the part where I would hold up a big stack of files to show how crazy we are, except we do everything electronically, so I can hold up my mouse.
Yes.
And so you've got the sort of multiple masters that we're serving, where you've got sophomores and juniors who are sitting there wanting to get the basics about the application process and admissions criteria and the university in general and programs. And then you've got the folks who have maybe already sat through this spiel a year and a half ago. Right. And now say, okay, now I need to make my decision, and how is this home for me?
Right, and that's a great point. I don't think that the junior in high school or that ambitious sophomore in high school that's doing a college visit during this break week has any less intensity or desire for information than that senior who's been admitted. I think they come at us with the same level of intensity, but the kind of questions they're asking and the kind of information they're looking at or looking for is very, very different. It starts with that, very cognitive, what majors do you have and how much does the school cost? And, that basic information with the high school senior, it's a very different kind of set of questions, and you hit the nail on the head saying, can I picture myself here?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what, nationwide, we can kind of look at some of the trends that are happening in college admissions and how that might be changing how colleges are predicting yield. I think if you looked back at any college's records from 20 years ago and their calculation from yield, that it's a very different ball game today. I'm talking about four-year colleges for the most part, and that most of them have seen an increase in applications in the past over the past recent years. And I'm actually going to send out a resource that we have from NACAC that does highlight some of the college admissions trends from recent years up through this past year, and talks a little bit about where those increases have happened and maybe why they've happened. And so partially, I think it's come from the high school graduates, but partially because of the way that they're applying to schools. And I think technology has affected that. I don't know if you recall switching into an online format, if that would have increased applications with the SUNY system, or any of those kind of changes over that timeline that might have affected the volume of applications that have come in. Did you see that?
I mean, we, like many places, saw the Common App spike 3 years ago when we joined Common App. And so that then, predicated the question of, okay, how serious are these students, and are they, and we sort of went through a fast app time period, and we sort of did all these things. And for us on the ground, it's, did these students apply because there's real interest there, or did they apply because we threw something at them and they said, sure, sounds interesting, it'll be my 14th choice if everything else falls through. And when you're looking at the volume of applications that we have, and we're looking at 28,000 applications, you can't focus on everybody, but you want to maximize your usage. You want to maximize mailing costs. Okay, so if we're going to mail an invitation to a program, to an admitted student program on campus, so we want to hit a particular cohort with, okay, can we save $200 by, I'm exaggerating, but you save a chunk of money by cutting out a particular group or only including a certain piece of the pool based on the trends that you've seen over the course of the last couple of years. All of a sudden, once your application starts spiking, all of a sudden those numbers sort of get crazy. I'm consistently amazed, though, at how, on a macro level, it really seems to work. I mean, we somehow hit our target every year, despite all the craziness that goes on and all the phone calls and all the madness. It happens every year. We make our class and we're happy and we're full and students show up and I never understand how that works. It's magic.
Yeah, well, hats off to your administration, because there are some really heavy number crunching calculations that go into all of this. And every institution does put their own projections together and their own targets to hit. But Common App is a great example of one of the challenges that's come on board in trying to predict yield, because it's much easier to apply to more schools through Common App. And you'll see in some of the NACAC reports that we'll be sharing tonight that there's been a huge increase in the number of applications that students are sending, where I think it's 25% or more students now are submitting to 7+ colleges. And that's a huge increase. So where do you fall in that 7?
That doesn't include all the applications that they're sending that are not Common App schools.
Sure.
I remember I was fascinated by it. I went to at the New England ACAC last summer. I went to the Common App workshop where they showed the trends over the years and how it broke down geographically. I thought it was a fascinating stat, and how in New England they're applying to more schools per student as opposed to the Midwest, and how that balance is struck. And so again, when you're approaching a student from Boston, they may have applied to 7 or 8 or 12 schools, whereas a student from the Midwest may have applied to 4. And so there's different perspectives there as to what, their number of options.
So there are things that, so what I think we're getting at here is that there's things that you can do to help predict yield better during that pre-accept time period. So I think colleges have to look at other items throughout the college admissions, throughout the application process or the review process, to indicate what the level of interest the student really has, and rather than it just being that they applied and that they're going to convert a certain way, there are other things that you can look at as indicators of whether that student really has a high level of interest. So are there things that you can think of that you've seen as those kind of indicators?
Well, I think that for us, and the perspective that I have over the last 7-8 years here at a big public research university that's undergone a pretty major transition, we're in a big upswing right now from the way that our SAT average has gone up, our GPA has gone up, applications have jumped. And so students are looking at Stony Brook in a different way, in some cases, than they were 4 or 5 years ago. And so whereas we're still, to a lot of local folks, the big public university that everybody applies to, there are some cases where we are a first choice for students. And, when it comes to, like, for example, honors program decisions, we look at a student who applies with, a really solid GPA and really top scores. Well, obviously that student's going to get strong consideration for honors programs and scholarships and all that. That student's also going to have a lot of other options at play. And it's a matter of trying to figure out where in the spectrum that we fit. And we're not going to deny those students admission to an honors program because they're maybe more likely to go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. It's a local kid who just applied to Stony Brook because their mom and dad told them to apply to Stony Brook, where they're really trying to get into an Ivy League school.
Right.
And so we're just like, oh, we're just a backup plan. We're not going to waste an honors college slot on you. Well, you can't, because that's a bright kid who's going to succeed here.
Sure.
And so, how you make those decisions from an application perspective, a programmatic perspective, I don't know, I'm using the phrase self-fulfilling prophecy, and that's not what I mean, but you've got to sort of find a way to break through that and make that work as systematically, so that the decisions you're making make sense, so that students see you as the place to be, and a realistic option.
Yeah, and I think some of the other things that colleges are certainly looking at as interest indicators are, have you visited campus? Did you do an interview? Some offices are tracking how many points of contact you've made with them. Are you applying through early decision or early action? and, looking a little bit more deeply at those letters of recommendations and, all of those sorts of things that where in the past might not have kind of made that borderline student an admitted student. Now, if they show that higher level of interest and show that they might be a higher yield student, those are some things that I think are going to become more important as this yield number gets a little bit fuzzier for folks.
True. There's a single question on the Common App on our supplement that says it's something along the lines of, why are you interested in Stony Brook, or something along those lines, and it's sort of buried on like the 5th or 6th page of the supplement. But it's startling to me how many students just don't answer it. And I like, at least fake it. I don't know, like it surprises me so. And sometimes I'll read a kid with a 1470 SAT, and it's like, all right, we're probably just going to admit this kid, but they just left that blank. And that to me is like, well, that's one of those cases where, yeah, we're going to admit this kid, but they're probably not coming.
Yeah. And I actually, it was an article that I read in passing where the University of Rochester had taken a really hard line on some of those decisions this past year, where you get a letter of or maybe not a letter of recommendation, but you get an essay that cites another college, or you see, you see those mistakes, but it's really that student that didn't have that attention to detail that they would
really want to
at
go to
their
MIT.
first
Okay,
choice
great. Good
college. Luck. Exactly. So, one of the points that I wanted to make that during the pre-accept process, that application review process, a lot of folks will get hung up on the acceptance rate number. And I didn't want to talk about acceptance rate in the show at this point. I think it's a kind of a funny thing to hang your hat on, and so when we get, into the difference between selectivity and yield, where, selectivity is really your acceptance rate, but yield is the number of butts in the seats come fall. And that's really, I think, the number that institutions should be paying the most attention to. So I'm glad we're having this conversation now. And I do think it's an extremely important statistic to be able to predict. Now, I'm not the predictor for my institution. I know there's a lot of crunching numbers that goes on, but there are things that we can affect post-accept. And I think that's where our conversation is going to get really interesting. So, we've talked about the challenges. We talked about challenges with Common App and more students applying that maybe aren't at that same level of interest and won't yield the same results. But let's talk a little bit about some of those post-accept strategies. And I think one that many students and parents kind of expect to see is, if you want me at your school, give me money. Right? So let's just assume we don't have money, and that's not going to solve that's not going to be the thing to solve our yield problem this year.
I started seeing that a couple of years ago. I started seeing that where it was the whole, you can negotiate with financial aid offices. And look, there's some truth there. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, especially these days,
Right. So let's assume that we're not just going to be able to throw a bunch of money at the students that we want to get them onto campus.
Right. Although at the same time, I talk about that student with the 1470 for whom Stony Brook may be a 14th choice. At the same time, if it's a real solid student who we're going to offer scholarship money to, that's a yield tool. I mean, that's a situation where, if a high-end student who may be looking at graduate programs down the road, where we offer scholarship dollars to that student, that's a student who might say, you know what, I can go to Stony Brook, even if I'm coming out of state, I can go for, just a couple $1,000s a year, which saves me money down the road for grad programs. And so it's not that we're giving up on the students who don't seem like good yield candidates, right. But the scholarship piece could, and rightfully probably does, play a reasonably big factor.
Right. Absolutely. So I think one of the things that all of us are trying to do our best is really ramp up that post-accept communication flow and try to communicate what it is we want to students and helping them make those final decisions. So what kind of strategies do you think are important? And, what are you seeing maybe as a trend or something that you find the most important when we start talking about communication post-accept?
We do, I've sat in on the various student panels at conferences and whatnot, and I'm very wishy-washy on the telecounseling piece. I think the follow-up phone calls from students and follow-up phone calls from counselors, I've sort of gone back and forth on how efficient I really think it is. And then I'll sit in a panel and students will say, oh yeah, when I got a call from school X, it really made an impact on me. And that just kind of blows my mind that, okay, yeah, if that works for you, that's okay, that's fine. So we make phone calls. We as from the counseling perspective, make phone calls. We're in the middle of that right now. We do student phone banks, if you will. I think there's that line between telecounseling and telemarketing, because the calls are usually in the evening during dinner time, the same way that telemarketers do. And you don't necessarily want to be that guy.
Right. And I've seen it, we do the same thing. And from the time that I was a student ambassador making phone calls, which was, I like to say, not too long ago, but when I was making phone calls, it was pretty easy to connect with students. And now almost every home has a caller ID, and Sure. They see a weird number coming in, they're not going to answer the phone. So it's a lot harder to connect over phone. It's harder even to connect over means of communication that you think would be easy, like email. So especially for a student that maybe doesn't have your institution at that top tier and they don't have you listed, on their radar during that post-accept time, how do you break through that barrier and really get that messaging out to them? And I guess, what is that messaging that's going to be most important to them during that time? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think for us, you mentioned the phone thing and caller ID and all that. And so when it does work, when students do pick up the phone and they do talk to somebody, I think that's a really good sign. I think that's the kind of thing where, when we give our list to our students, we do it, we'll give the lists to students based on a particular geographic area or an academic program or whatever, or I'll keep notes of all my students as I'm reading. Students are interested in marching band. And so, a girl who works in our office is one of our drum majors, and so I'll give her a list of marching band folks to call. And so if she's able to make a couple of those connections, then, she makes a little note on there, and then I follow up within a couple of days to, okay, yeah, have they visited? And that's where, and everything gets tracked. We track literally everything through Hobson's now, where we can say, all right, yeah, the student visited back in, they visited last summer. Okay, so now when we call for, invite them for a follow-up visit, we're going to need to do something a little bit different, because they've already made the trip to visit campus. They've done the information session. They don't need to see the same thing over again. So if we're going to invite them back to campus, you want to invite them for some sort of specialized experience where you hook them up with a faculty member or visit a class kind of experience, something like that. It's hard to do on a macro level, but that's why we're people. I think admissions decisions could honestly be made by robots. As long as the GPAs and SATs are in the system, yeah, make the decisions and go. But it's the personal connection that hopefully helps sort of grease that and make that smoother. And that's where the yield piece happens.
Absolutely.
That's where I think we cross that line from marketing folks to counselors. And that's why this is the time of year that I love my job, because I love doing this kind of stuff.
That's awesome. And, I love that, we're talking about what the student wants being very different at this time. And you touched on so many things there, connecting students to other student groups, connecting them to their interests, those interests changing, and, really utilizing a CRM tool to try to predict what that student will want, and understanding what they've already done and what they might be interested in next. This is where we really make strides. This is where we really become, like you said, become a counselor, become someone that's involved in their decision-making process. And so, I think there's a lot that can be done there. And I want to get into kind of the social networking piece that's available to students now in just a minute. But I think one of the things that we've kind of skirted around but hinted at is that in the messaging, kind of what comes next for you message or some kind of calendar for students is really critical at this time, especially for first generation students. So do you find that they really have that desire to understand, I got accepted, now what?
Yeah, and I think that's sort of, again, you talk about making it easy for them. I mean, when I talk to students today at the information session, a student will come up and say, okay, I've been admitted, and either they have a question about whatever, and I start talking about setting them up for orientation. Like, you start putting it in their head that, okay, yeah, I got to pay my deposits, and then, all right, so when you fill out your student preference form and when you come to orientation, you put it in their heads that, yes, you will be coming to orientation. You're one of us now.
Right. Yeah.
You are a seawolf.
And it's...
but
awesome.
We're like a cult. We're like the seawolf cult.
Right, nice.
But it's about the calendar piece is important because it gives them late. I've been reading applications all day and doing sessions. So it helps formalize it in their minds. And you mentioned the first generation thing, which is really important. You get that, okay, yeah, really, what do I do? Like, where do we go? And the more you can get that message out, even if it's a postcard, if they're not picking up the phone and they're dumping you into their junk mail box, right. A simple postcard to kind of keep you in their thoughts can be effective.
Yeah, definitely. And it's exactly what you said. It's telling them the things that are going to come next so that they can start envisioning themselves at orientation. They can, they're on campus and, this isn't just about sending them on a tour and seeing the class that they might get to sit in. It's about letting them sit in a class and really kind of feel like a student and see if that comfort level will be there for them. So that's great.
And you talk about the social networking piece.
Yes, let's talk about that.
I like using our social networking stuff. There are a number of our student groups that are very, very active on Facebook, and I'm very comfortable directing students there.
Yeah,
where they're completely not off the grid, but it's not a supervised conversation in any way. Where I can say, hey, you're interested in field hockey. Our club field hockey team is on Facebook all the time, and they update with games and videos, and rugby does the same thing. If you're interested in that, go talk to them, and they'll recruit right. Because they don't see it as a statistical thing. They just see it as, hey, fresh blood, and we can have the team can continue.
Yeah.
And they're very supportive, even in a real informal way.
Absolutely. And so there's a lot available right now for students in social networks, kind of all across the boards and all different kinds of facets. We talked a little bit about phone calls. More and more popular in recent years have been chat events as well, whether that's a third party or open source that you're using, or if you're getting involved with a company like College Week Live to host a bigger major event chat for you. And there's all sorts of other companies that are out there helping to support this. And, of course, I have to give a shout out to Integral because they're doing not only some pretty advanced work with their application for Yield, but they're also doing a lot of research to kind of back up what they're doing. And I found a video, doing a little bit of research over the weekend that I thought was great to show students' reaction to just meeting with each other over social networks before they get to campus. And, you have to think about these students who are trying to understand who they're going to live with, trying to understand who they're going to be on your campus in this new life that they're going to be taking over. But they're not on your campus. They don't have that ability to connect and go to the club office and ask questions or go meet the captain of the team. They really only have that online space to be in 24/7 to kind of connect. So I think social networking and social media platforms that are out there are some incredible tools, and there's a lot of really great ones out there. I'm using Facebook right now. I don't know what you.
What is this Facebook of which you speak? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm struggling with Facebook right now. We're in a war.
Oh, you're in a fight.
Yeah, and I think I've been pretty open about this in the past, and I'm trying to come up with some solutions. I think I have one. If I do come up with a solution, I'll be happy to share it on Admissions Live. I'm really working hard on it, but there's a lot of resources out there. Of course we've got Integral. There's a company called Red Rover. We've got Varsity Outreach out there. You've got your own Facebook groups and pages that you can run on your own. People have used networks like Ning or set up their own in-house private networks, which is pretty crazy. Are there other ones that you've used or have kind of kept tabs on?
We're starting to explore Google Plus a little bit. Stony Brook as a university just jumped on the Google bandwagon, and so we're going all Google in the next couple months. And so we're exploring what we can do Google Plus wise, as far as interactive experiences and hangouts and things like that with students and current students, admitted students. We don't know. We're sort of throwing open the doors, and we're going to play around with stuff and see if it works. And try to come up with, track things as best we can, try to use some data to make it work.
Yeah, that's great. I know we have a big Reddit culture at RIT. We're actually the largest subreddit that's out there for colleges and universities. We got a huge kind of underground thing going on Reddit. It scares the heck out of me. But so that's another space that I see students coming in. We've got some questions coming in over Twitter that I want to address.
Right.
So one of the questions from Zinch is, what about using Zinch? Of course. I need to be educated in Zinch a little bit more, I think, because I see them mostly as that application tool. And I haven't seen it used very much in this post-accept yield effort. The follow-up question is, what social media efforts are you using? For myself, currently, I'm working inside of a Facebook page for accepted students. And Facebook, another question coming in is, why fight Facebook? Well, I'll tell you why I fight Facebook all the time is because they change things on me every 6 months. And it's really, really hard to manage something when you think you've got it down and then they shake things up on you. So that's why I'm in constant battles with Facebook. But what kind of, you mentioned that you're connecting students on Facebook, or when you know that there are student groups available to connect, what other kinds of things are you doing?
The other thing, especially with Facebook stuff, I'm not afraid to use admitted students for my benefit. We've got a student right now on our 2016 page who has completely on her own organized a New York City meetup for any interested student. And we've got 680 some odd students who have liked the page, or people, I should say. I don't know if they're all students, but
right.
So, and I don't know how many people will show up, but those kinds of students, I'm not afraid to sort of enfranchise them a little bit. And if they're already proselytizing without our encouragement, then I am more than happy to encourage that. I've had to sort of rein in students on the back end as well. We've had current students who, we've had a student on College Confidential who tried so very hard to be helpful, but wasn't necessarily misinformation, but it wasn't necessarily complete information either. And so I had to kind of call him in and, okay, look, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but, you want to sort of make sure that they're, especially when they're not presenting themselves in an official capacity, but I think as a high school senior, if someone's representing themselves as a Stony Brook student, they don't care whether they're an official ambassador of the university or if they're just Joe student who's just on there from their residence hall. I don't think they make that differentiation.
And that's a really great point. Really great point to make because, even if I'm fighting with Facebook, I can't ignore it.
No.
I am scared to death of Reddit, but I really can't ignore it because I know it's such a big group.
Yeah.
These social networks that are out there, if you're not paying attention to them, the students are. And there's a great comment that came in on Twitter that reminded me of this also, is that's where Facebook is where your students are. It's where they're being social. They're looking to connect with other current students on Facebook. So if you're not the one that's being proactive and making these pages for them, they're going to do it on their own. And that's where you can get into the situation where if you're not monitoring it and there is misinformation out there, how are you able to then correct that and get the right information to your students? So it's really, really important to pay attention to it. For me, the challenge that I've seen is with my yield goals in mind, and the relationship building that I'm looking to do, Facebook really isn't offering me that tool to meet those goals. So while yes, the students are there, it's still not delivering the results. So I think we can do better. And
I agree.
Continually looking for a solution. It's a conversation that, we can do a whole show on this. So
just on Facebook? Yes,
just
absolutely.
on Facebook, just on, this little niche corner of Facebook. So I'm looking forward to continued conversations about that for sure. So I want to take some more questions from Twitter. For those of you that are tuning in, if you've got questions for Chris about any of the topics that we've covered here, I want to talk about some of the opportunity points that might be out there, what people think works best. If you've got something that you're doing that you want to share or an idea that you want to bounce around, let's get that conversation starting now. So I'm going to kind of turn over to the back channel and see what we've got out there. And we've got a question from Social Admissions from Zinch asking, what would we like to see as a useful tool? So, Chris, if we could wave the IT wand at Facebook or another tool out there, what would you like to see available for students?
Boy, I don't know that I know. I wish there was that sort of magic wand. I think that, I think students want to see reality. I think they want to see, they want to see home. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to making that transition from their high school environment to where they're going to go to college, they want to see someplace where they can see as home, whatever that may mean to them, whether it be physical space or academic space or whatever. And I just think we want the tools to reflect that in some way, with authentic and be real. When I coordinated tours, I always told my tour guides, to be honest when students are asking questions. You want to be positive as best you can because you're representing the university, but you want to be honest because students will see through it if it's fake. We had a discussion on the Facebook page recently where it sort of got out of hand. Well, not out of hand, but there was talk of alcohol and all these kinds of things. And one of our current students, who is one of our girls who works in the office, she posted, she said, you may want to watch what you're saying here because, this is a public forum.
Sure.
And so, you want that authenticity, but at the same time, you want it to be professional and you want it to be representative of who you are as an institution.
Right.
And so that's not to say that there's no alcohol on campus, but you want it's something that looks official, which again, to a student, the Stony Brook 2016 page is as official as it comes. You want to make sure that that's representing your institution the way that your institution wants to be represented.
Yeah. And I guess I'll answer the question and then we got to kind of wrap things up. I didn't realize how late it was getting.
Holy cow, it's 7:50.
So for me, what I'd like to see is exactly what you said, and being able, these students to be able to kind of form their own home or their new identity as a college student. And for a lot of my students, I think they have interests that, they might be a one-off at their high school. They might be the one student that is really super passionate about animation or really super passionate about microelectronic engineering, or and I want to give them a space that they can kind of go and geek out, and that is different from Facebook, where they are connecting with family and friends that already exist. Giving them that true college identity in a space with other like-minded students, and where you can get there in some of these social platforms. I don't think we're quite there yet, so that's what I'm looking for, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. But that's, I think, where the personal connection really comes in. I remember meeting with a student from one of my high schools a couple of years back who indicated on her application that she was interested in anime and a bunch of those kinds of things. And so we have a big comic book and anime festival every spring. And so I said, hey, you want to come to this? It's, here are the dates, here's the information. And she came and she loved it and she enrolled. And now she's part of, she goes and she performs and she, and those are the kinds of connections that are real connections that directly impact what we do face to face.
Right. And, I think we're at a great point for this, because there's incredible opportunity to be able to connect students before they get to campus that we didn't have before. And it's really just trying to harness that and, find the right tools that are going to help us get there. And I think there are companies that are really doing awesome work in this area. And there's some schools that are taking it upon themselves to build these things from scratch and really make it their own as well. And props to them for dedicating their resources to do that. But I think we're going to get there, and I think when it happens, it's going to be really, really interesting, both for admissions folks to kind of watch and learn from, but for the students to really, find that best fit school and have the confidence going there that this is going to be the place for them, and hopefully that helps with the retention down the road.
Right, especially if particularly that place is Stony Brook.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry. wrong forum, my bad.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much. Are there any, last words besides come to Stony Brook that you would like to share? Yes. Where you think maybe the best part to kind of tap into your maybe that little inner student affairs person inside of you that wants to reach out. Anything that you can kind of share as a last word?
Well, I think that's the great struggle in what we do as admissions folks, and what makes admissions different from student affairs is, we go to a student affairs conference and it's really easy to share ideas because, we did this great program with our students. Oh yeah, we'll copy that program and we'll do the same thing. Sure. Well, you look at RIT. You've got an engineering school. We're an engineering school. And so I'm sure there's probably a decent amount of overlap between our applications in some cases. And so, for us to sit in this kind of thing, we'll be like, all right, so we do this thing. And then for RIT to say, oh, Stony Brook does this, we need to do it too. Right. And so we shouldn't be afraid to share ideas, though. And that's why it's great that we do this. And the thing you mentioned about, and it's not to knock vendors, because I love all the vendors that we work with, and even the vendors we don't work with, I love you too. But not every school necessarily has the resources to go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars on.
Absolutely.
And that's why, Facebook is a great fallback, because it is free, despite the frustrations that you deal with it. But there are ways to make those connections, whether you're, on lots of different levels. So. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great. I think this conversation has opened up many doors for future conversations.
Yeah, same time next week. Got it.
Seriously.
My wife will kill me.
So thanks so much. I'm going to cut you loose.
It's been real.
For those of you that are tuning in late and still have questions for us, we'll be on the Admissions Live hashtag all week long. And we'll be back next week on Tuesday for another exciting episode of Admissions Live. Thanks, everyone.